It's like I don't care about nothing, man. Yeah. Oh,
What's going on, guys? This video is going to be about using our angle relationships that we've gone over on page 7 and the pages leading up to this, and we're going to use those to finish off some proofs. So yeah, I hope you enjoy. So now we're looking at page 14, number 1. We are now using our angle relationships in proofs. So we are, remember with proofs, the first thing is always the given. So the first statement will be whatever they say, like they do, and the first reason will be given. So they already did put that in there for us. We're trying to prove that C is congruent to K. So first things first, we have a blank in the statement, and they say the reason is corresponding angles. So I want to look in this picture and see if there's any corresponding angles. Well, I do happen to notice one, and that is C and P. So something I hopefully remember from corresponding angles is that they are congruent. So for the statement, we're going to put angle C is congruent to angle P. And the reason we knew they were congruent is because they are corresponding angles. So the corresponding angles theorem is our reason. The next one says K is congruent to P. So K and P are directly across from each other. When they're directly across from each other, they are vertical angles. So by vertical angles theorem, I know that they are congruent. Now the last reason, it says C is congruent to K. That is what we're trying to prove. Now we know this because, so we want to do like one of our postulates. So if you notice, we said C was congruent to P, K congruent to P, and C is congruent to K. So I had 3 different letters being said that they're supposed to be equal to each other. So if that's the case, that was one of the properties I told you to highlight, star, make sure that you make a big deal about it. That would be our transitive property. So transitive property is when you have 3 or more being supposed to be equal or congruent to each other. So one answer you could have wrote down is transitive property. Another answer I would have taken and accepted was substitution. So that's another property I would have accepted. I also could have noticed that they're alternate interior. So as you see, there are multiple answers I would have accepted for number 4. So the reasoning why we're trying to prove that C is congruent to K. So all those would be correct answers. The next problem that we have is number 2 on the same page. It says, which of the following is a condition for the figure that will not prove that line 1 is parallel to line 2? So the first one that we have is A and C. So those would be corresponding angles. And if you go back to the pages before, what we know about corresponding angles is corresponding angles let you know that the lines must be parallel. So this one would prove that they're parallel, so we're not going to choose that answer. Let's skip to C. This one, angle A is congruent to angle D. These would be alternate interior. Alternate interior would also be one of the ones that does prove that they're parallel. And then D was A and B. Those would be consecutive interior. And this 2 would prove that they are congruent. So I purposely skipped B because I didn't want to just give you the correct answer that quickly. For this one, it says B plus D equals 180. So B plus D, these form a linear pair. If you notice, when we talked about the linear pair postulate, it doesn't say anything about lines being parallel. What it says is that they're supplementary. So yes, they have to equal 180, but it would not prove that the lines are parallel. So our answer for this one would be B. So the last one on this page is number 3. It says consider the lines L1, L2, and L3 in the diagram. Write a paragraph proof. We're given that L1 and L2 are parallel. They want us to prove that angle B is congruent to angle H. So a paragraph proof is very similar to a normal proof. The only difference is we have to actually write out incomplete sentences. So what I am going to do is I'm going to write it down and then I'll explain my reasoning for it. So as promised, I went ahead and wrote it all in there. I figured this would be easier than me trying to write it in and use more time. What I have said is we are given that L1 is parallel to L2. So even when it's a paragraph proof, we always want to start with the given. Then I went on to say angle B and angle D add up to 180 because they are a linear pair. So these two together formed a linear pair. Next, I said angle D and angle H add to 180 because they are consecutive interior. So these would be consecutive interior, which are supplementary and have to add up to 180. So then I went on to say angle B and H are congruent because of congruent supplements theorem. So I knew that these were congruent. So because of the fact that I used B and H earlier and they both dealt with D. So I'm just going to off to the side. This isn't part of the proof, but this can help you visualize what I just did. I was saying that B plus H equaled 180. Oh, sorry, B plus D equaled 180. So B plus D.
What an idiot.
So this was a linear pair, and D plus H equaled 180. So the idea is that they both use D. So that means that it must have been, that must mean that B and H have to be the same for them both to end up adding up to 180. So that's the idea of what I just did there. But this is, we don't do very many paragraph proofs, but the idea is you just write what you would in a normal proof except in sentence form. Okay, so the last problem I'm going to do in this video is number 4. We're given that L1 is parallel to L2. We're trying to prove that angle A plus angle G is equal to 180 degrees. Now, first thing right off the bat, you better know what this reason is. We've been saying it multiple times. The first thing in a proof is always the given. So the first reason is always given. So this should be a freebie that you just gotten. So next up we have, it says for the reason linear pair postulate. So we have to come up with a linear pair that we want to use. Now when we choose which one we're going to do, we want to choose one that's going to use one of the letters up here. Now I notice G is already being used down here, so I'm going to go ahead and use A up here. So angle A, I'm going to say is adds up with angle C to 180 degrees. Because when you're talking about linear pair postulate, I know that they have to add up to 180. So I chose A and C. So the reason I chose A was because I need to make sure I use one of the letters that I'm trying to prove up here. And I chose C as well because I noticed that I use C later on, and these do form a linear pair. So next it says the definition of supplementary angles. So the definition of supplementary angles means that they have to add up to 180. So I can just go ahead and write the same thing. Angle A plus angle C equals 180 degrees. Because linear pair postulate is they have to be supplementary. So they have to add to 180. The next one, number 4, it says C is congruent to G. So C and G, that is one of our angle relationships. That would be corresponding angles. So those ones were congruent because they are corresponding angles. So next they say the definition of congruent. So what I'm going to use for this one is I'm going to choose, since I did corresponding angles up here, well, I'm just going to choose another set of corresponding angles. I'm going to go with A and E. So angle A would be congruent to angle E. So that could be the definition of congruent. So I know that they have to be equal. Now the last one says angle A plus angle G must equal 180. So the idea here is we have to find a reason that proves why they are congruent. So one of them can be our congruent supplements theorem. And the reason being is earlier we used A, we also used G, and we were proving that they can be equal to 180 degrees. So that can be one of our answers. I would also take substitution. And I would also take consecutive exterior. So if I saw any of these answers, I would accept any of these answers if I saw it on your on a quiz or test. But on quizzes or tests, typically will give you at least a word bank, and you won't have to come up with it yourself. So that's the end of this video. What I want you to do for practice is page 15, number 5 and 6. So I want you to finish off page 15 for your practice. But hopefully by the end of this video, now you understand how to use your angle relationships in a proof.